Now with quid pro quo Joe's pathetic showing in Iowa. Now what looks like a fifth-place finish coming up in New Hampshire. Many in the Democratic establishment seem to be jumping ship, looking for Plan B. Many have been throwing their support behind, well, the kind of dull and boring billionaire, former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg. We know he's been spending hundreds of millions of dollars of his own money. Some would say, even his fellow Democrats, he's attempting to buy the nomination. Now, America has only been fed what is clearly an extremely slick, multi-million-dollar marketing campaign, but over the last 24 hours, a huge problem has now emerged, and that is the former New York City mayor's past comments have surfaced, and his remarks about race are downright shocking and disturbing and also revealing. If you recall, in a transparent attempt to pander to minority voters. We call it identity politics. Remember when he kicked off his presidential campaign? Remember he made that, quote, apology, got all teary-eyed over stop and frisk. That was a policy he enthusiastically supported during his entire time as a New York City mayor. That was 12 full years. And by the way, the subsequent 5 years with Mayor de Blasio, he never once apologized. That is until he decided to run for president. So one can only conclude that his so-called apology 17 years later was nothing more than, well, political expediency, crocodile tears designed to appeal to a big part of the Democratic coalition and African-American and minority voters, which is a big part of the Democratic Party's base. And now new audio emerging showing that Bloomberg really thought what he really thought about stop and frisk. It's alarming. It's revealing. In fact, it is so bad, some in his own party are now accusing him of actually being a racist. Let's start in 2013. Bloomberg actually complained that, quote, white people were being stopped too much by the police and minorities too little. You heard me right. He actually said white people being stopped too much, minorities were not being frisked enough. You can hear it in his own words. Let's take a listen.
It's not a disproportionate percentage of those who witnesses and victims describe as committing the murder. In that case, incidentally, I think we disproportionately stop whites too much and minorities too little.
That was only 7 short years ago, and more recently in 2015, Bloomberg, well, he doubled down on his comments, even bragged that he put all, pay attention to the words all, not some, but all, the police in minority communities in New York, neighborhoods in New York, because, quote, that's where all, not some, all the crime is. And by the way, that's a pretty, well, inaccurate statement on top of everything else. In fact, he said that the only way to prevent this crime was to throw minority kids, quote, up against a wall and frisk them, in his own words. Let's listen in.
95% of your murders and murderers and murder victims fit one MO. You can just take the description, Xerox it, and pass it out to all the cops. They are male, minorities, 15 to 25. That's true in New York. It's true in virtually every city in America. And that's where the real crime is. It's one of the unintended consequences is people say, oh my God, you are arresting kids for marijuana. They're all minorities. Yes, that's true. Why? Because we put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods. Yes, that's true. Why do we do it? Because that's where all the crime is. And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them against the wall and frisk them.
Now, I've lived in Rhode Island 5 years, California 5 years, Alabama 2, Georgia 4. I grew up in Long Island. I've lived in New York. I've been broadcasting this program from there for now in my 24th year. I can tell you that it is a fact that people of all races commit crimes in New York and New York City specifically, but apparently not according to Bloomberg. He thinks 95% of violent criminals are, quote, male, minorities, 16 to 25. That's, quote, according to him, true in New York. It's true in virtually every city. Now, is this not the definitive definition of not only racial profiling? All police go into the community, all crimes are being committed, but definition of what we say is racial profiling. He also said, quote, you can just take a description of minorities, Xerox it, pass it out to all the cops. Okay, stop for 1 second. Imagine if President Donald Trump had said this. Imagine the media mob, the hysteria, the outrage. People would be apoplectic. It would be 24/7 coverage till Election Day, which is in 267 days, when you become the ultimate jury, and you will have an opportunity to shock the world once again. If this is a Republican, it would probably, likely, end any and all presidential aspirations. They would be dead in the water. Well, now the choice for Democrats is going to be simple. Will they nominate the former mayor of New York City who has said all of this? Again, what if Donald Trump had said it all? I have been reminding this audience now for many, many years, every 2 years, every 4 years, every election season, we have a Democratic Party. They rely heavily on identity politics to win elections. I have pointed out over and over again a history of the race card sadly being played as part of the Democratic Party's playbook every single election, which brings us to a short Hannity history lesson. Without fail, in these election years, one thing is always a constant. Democrats will call their opponents racist, sexist, misogynic, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic. They will claim Republicans, their plan, according to Barack Obama, is they want dirty air and dirty water. And then they'll get a Paul Ryan, or I guess in this case, maybe a Kevin McCarthy lookalike to throw grandma over a cliff. Take a look.
Many Republicans talk in coded racial language about takers and losers. They demonize President Obama and encourage the ugliest impulses of the paranoid fringe.
If you accept the support of Klan sympathizers before you are president, you will accept their support after you're president.
He's going to let the big banks once again write their own rules. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains.
It's wrong what the leader of the Republican Party and this Congress are doing in blocking an accurate census because they don't want to count everyone that they don't think they can count on.
They are in favor of affirmative action if you can dunk the basketball or sink a three-point shot. But they're not in favor of it if you merely have the potential to be a leader in your community and bring people together. Don't tell me we've got a colorblind society.
June 7, 1998, in Texas, my father was killed. He was beaten, chained, and then dragged 3 miles to his death, all because he was black. So when Governor George W. Bush refused to support hate crimes legislation, it was like my father was killed all over again.
When you don't vote, you let another church explode. When you don't vote, you allow another cross to burn.
How does the president end his rallies? Usually that signature ending, which is, we are one glorious nation under God. We are one American family. How does any of that bring this country together? And as you can see, the Democratic Party, well, they really seem to only care about race, gender, when they can use it to club their opponents. For them, it seems to be nothing more than a sad, divisive, predictable political tactic, year after year after year. And meanwhile, in stark contrast, we can now compare and contrast policies, success and failure. The president's agenda has been helping minorities in real life, opportunity zones, tax cuts, the biggest decrease in regulation in history. All Americans are benefiting of all demographics and backgrounds thanks to the Trump economy. And by the way, very different under Biden and Obama. 13 million more Americans on food stamps, 8 million more in poverty, the lowest labor participation rate since the 70s. Now what do we have? African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, women in the workplace, youth unemployment, African American youth unemployment. We now have the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years in this country, record after record. The president has blown wide open opportunity for every single American. Yes, that one American family, that one glorious nation under God. And that's not all. Look at your screen. You can see it there. Look at that. Alice Marie Johnson, we've had her on last week. Remember, she was serving a life sentence, nonviolent, first-time drug offense. President Trump not only commuted her sentence, thanks to Kim Kardashian and Kanye West, but he also did something that many other presidents had promised, but never fulfilled their promise on, and that was, criminal justice reform, prison reform. Now, nonviolent first-time offenders won't get a life sentence in jail behind bars. Thousands of imprisoned minorities have, and soon will be, a second shot at life. That's the kind of hope and change that Democrats constantly promise, but it was President Trump that actually delivered that. And now several recent polls are showing the president's support among minorities has tripled or even higher. 4 years ago, President Trump vowed to improve the lives of all Americans, no matter what race or gender. He famously said, "What have you got to lose?" Tonight, we can confidently say promises made and kept, because now the Democratic Party, veering hard to the left, radical socialist left, with a scary brand of socialism, New Green Deal, Medicare for all. How did Obamacare work out? Now we finally have real measures here. Success, prosperity, and frankly, the very way of life for every single solitary American at stake in 266 days. You, the American people, you're the ultimate jury. You will control the fate of this great country for your children and your grandchildren. And by the way, despite some rumors to the contrary tonight, the other billionaire, Democrat Tom Steyer, he is remaining in the race for president.